What's up, sixth graders? This is lesson 10, day 3, and today you're going to learn about dividing by decimals. So we're going to start by making sure you're on page 106, and if you are on page 106, let's get started. So the problem at the top says, Olympic National Park is 28.5 miles from Forks, Washington. It took the Pierce family 3/4 of an hour, or 0.75 hours, to drive there. What was their average speed in miles per hour? So just so you know, the average speed in miles per hour means anytime they want the average speed, you're going to be dividing. So we're going to have to divide the total miles they went by how long it took to drive there. That's how you get average speed. So that's a division problem, and we're dividing a decimal by a decimal. So we're going to go through a couple strategies here. 1, we're going to estimate our quotient first, and 2, we're going to show you how to divide a decimal by a decimal. All right, so now let's start by estimating it. So when you are estimating this, you want to make it so they're numbers that are easy to divide. So for example, you might say 28.5 is about 30. That's a nice easy number. And 3/4 or 3/4 or 0.75 is about 1. So if you want to estimate the average speed, you just have to do 30 miles divided by 1 hour. Okay? So that's one way to estimate it. Now that will get you an answer that's close. But now we're going to talk about how to actually get the exact answer. So let's go through here. I'm going to try to explain what they're trying to do to show you here. So first off, stick with me. It says, since the fraction bar means division, let me get this so we can see it all. Since the fraction bar means division, you can write the division problem as a fraction to understand how to divide by decimals. So what we're saying here first is 28.5 divided by 0.75 can be written so it looks like a fraction, because that fraction bar just means division. So they mean the same thing. All right, now, this next step, follow along with the pointer. To get a whole number divisor, remember the divisor is the number you are dividing by, multiply 0.75 by 100. The decimal point moves 2 places to the right. If you multiply the denominator by 100, you also have to multiply the numerator by 100. So here's what they're saying. I'm going to show this problem here, 28.5 divided by 0.75. So the point is, right now we have this fraction with decimals in it, and decimals and fractions just don't mix well together. So what we want to do is we want to get this to be a whole number. So I know that if I multiply it by 100, what I'm really going to do is I'm going to take this decimal point and move it twice to the right, which is going to give me 75. Now I know to keep this fraction equivalent, if I multiply the denominator by 100, I must also multiply the numerator by 100. Now that's going to move this decimal point twice to the right. Now I'm going to have to add a 0 here so that I can move it twice to the right. And now when I move my decimal twice to the right, I'm going to get 2,850. Now, because I multiplied the numerator and denominator both by 100, that means that these fractions are equivalent. Okay? That if they're equivalent, they're the same. All right, now that also means, if we look here, this division problem, 28.5 divided by 0.75 is equivalent to 2,850 divided by 75. So in other words, we'll get the same answer. Now, let's go down here and we're going to show you how you would just do that, because you're not going to write it as a fraction to do this when you're really doing these problems. So follow along here. It says the divisor has 2 decimal places. Moving the decimal point 2 places to the right to get a whole number is the same as multiplying the divisor by 100. If you multiply the divisor by 100, you have to do the same to the dividend. So let me show you what they're talking about. So here's the original problem, 28.5 divided by 0.75. So do you remember up at the top here, I multiplied 0.75 times 100 to get 75. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to move my decimal twice to the right, which changes that to a 75. So that's the same as multiplying it by 100. Now, also, if you remember at the top, since I multiplied the numerator by 100, I had to multiply the denominator by 100. So what that means is I'm also going to multiply this by 100, which is going to give me 2,850 divided by 75. So that's really what you do. Whatever you do to this decimal point, you do to this decimal point. And now, this is the division problem I'm going to solve in a little bit. All right, or you're going to solve in a little bit. I should say it that way. Okay, so now, you could always rewind and watch something again if there was something you didn't understand. But we're moving to the next page. So here is what you're going to start to do. We're going to break these questions down a little bit at a time. So your first job is going to be to answer 9, 10, and 11 using the problems on the page to the left. Pause the video while you're doing 9, 10, 11. Restart the video when you're done. Go ahead. Okay, so for number 9, it says, look at estimated. About how many miles per hour is their average speed? Well, in the estimated, we rounded 28.5 to 30, and we rounded 0.75 to 1. So their average speed, if you divide that, is about 30 miles per hour. Okay, if you had that for number 9, give yourself a C. If you had it wrong, make sure you pause it and fix it. Now 10 says, look at model it. Why do you multiply 0.75 by 100? So let's go over there and talk about it. So in the model it, why do we multiply 0.75 times 100? Well, the reason is because we're trying to get rid of the decimal point. And if you multiply it by 100, the decimal moves twice to the right, and you get a whole number. So that's what I'm going to explain. So I multiply 0.75 by 100, and I'm going to say to change 0.75 to 75 so that we have a whole number. Now, you do not need the exact words that I have, but you need to have the idea that we're trying to change this to a whole number 75. If you have that in your own words, you're good. If not, put it in your own words while you pause the video. Now, number 11 says, why do you have to multiply 28.5 by 100? So let's go back to the previous page. So, let me explain it here. If you think of the division problem as a fraction, if we multiply the numerator by 100, you must multiply the denominator by 100. That's how you keep it equivalent. And that's why these two fractions are equivalent. They'll get you the same answer. So when I go back here, why do you have to multiply 28.5 by 100? Well, the reason is because, let me fix that a little bit. Because I multiplied 0.75 by 100, I must multiply 28.5 by 100 as well. All right, remember, whatever you do to the denominator, you must do the same thing to the numerator. Now, remember, if you had it wrong, fix it. If you had it in your own words, you're good to go. But you could also pause the video to make corrections. All right, so now we're going to go down and you're going to answer the next 3 questions. You're going to answer 12, 13, and 14. As soon as you're done, restart the video and go over your answers with me. Ready? Go. So, in number 12, it says, what is the Pierce's family's average speed? Now, we know the estimate, their average speed is about 30 miles per hour. But now we're going to figure out the division problem. So let's see how you did. So find your work. Now, by the way, if you did not do this division problem, you need to pause the video now and do it before you watch me do it. All right? If you did do the division problem, I want you to watch it carefully, pause the video when needed, and you can rewind it a little bit if you need to see something again. Ready? I'm going to start by doing a little bit of a counting by 75 list. So I'm going to do 75, 150, 225, 300, 375. I'll add more later if I need to. Now I'm going to figure out what 75 goes into. It does not go into 2. It does not go into 28. It will go into the 285, though, 3 times, which is 225. So I'm going to subtract and bring down the 0. Now my new number is 600, so 375 isn't high enough. I'm going to keep adding on 75s. So if I add on 75, by the way, when I add on 75, think of 75 as 50 and 25. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add on 50 and 25. So for example, if I add on 25 to this, I get 400. 400 plus 50 is 450. So 450 plus 50 is 500, plus 25 is 525. And 525 plus 75 is 600. So now, how many times does 75 go into 600? It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 times, which is 600. Subtract 0. So my exact answer is 38. So going back over to 12, what's the Pierce family's average speed? The answer is 38 miles per hour. Now 13 says, does your answer make sense? Explain how you know. Now, I think it does. Now the reason I know is, remember my estimate. My estimate was 30 miles per hour when I did some rounding. And 38 miles per hour is pretty close to it. So I'm going to say yes, my answer makes sense. Because 38 miles per hour is close to my estimate (30 miles per hour). Okay? So, if you said yes and you said it was close to the estimate in your own words, you're good to go. Don't need my exact words. Now 14 says, explain how to divide when the divisor is a decimal. Okay, so in 14, it's what we have to do. So I'm going to use my example problem, or the problem from above. So think of, we had 28.5 divided by 0.75. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is you multiply the divisor. Now the divisor is the number you divide by. So you multiply the divisor by, it could be by 10, 100, 1,000, whatever you need to do, so that it's a whole number. Okay, so remember in our example, we multiplied it by 100 because that made it a 75. Now, the second step is you then, let me get my pen ready, then multiply the dividend Now remember, the dividend is the first number. Multiply the dividend by the same thing. Then last, just divide. Now, remember, if you're trying to copy what I'm writing, wait and listen. You could always pause the video. So remember, we multiplied 0.75 by 100 to make it a 75. So then you multiply the dividend by the same thing. That keeps it equivalent, and that gets rid of the decimal on that one too. And then after you do that, you just do your division problem. All right. So if you had that in your own words, you don't need to change it. But if you were wrong, or if you need to add some things, pause the video now to make your corrections. All right, so now let's do some try-it problems. So we are going to do number 15 together, and then I'm going to have you try 16. So let's get started. You can get a separate sheet of paper to do 15, or if you have room in your book, that's fine. Just don't squish it in somewhere. I'm going to get this ready here. Ooh, so you just saw a sneak peek at the problem. Luckily, it went away. So let's read this problem here. It says, at a craft fair, Emily made $52.50 selling paper flowers. If she sold the flowers for 75 cents each, how many paper flowers did she sell? So let's start by figuring out the division problem. So first, because this is the total she made, she is taking that $52.50. Now, the reason why she is dividing it by 75 cents is because, think about this for a second. The flowers were 75 cents each, and we want to figure out how many flowers did she sell. So in other words, you're trying to figure out how many 75 cents are in $52.50. All right, so that's going to be our division problem. Now, first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you if I were estimating it. So, and you can do this part with me. Have this division problem written down, by the way. So $52.50 is about $50, and 75 cents rounds to about $1. And 50 divided by 1 is about 50. So she's going to sell about 50 flowers. All right, it's going to be somewhat close to there, not like really close. But it's going to be close enough where if we really screw up our division, we'll know it. All right, but don't worry too much about the estimate. That just gives me an idea. But now, we are going to figure out where the decimal point goes. So remember, do this with me, because I'm going to have you pause it and I'm going to have you try it for a second. So first thing, think of $52.50 divided by 75 cents written with a fraction line to show division. So write this down. Okay, so get that written down. Now, the problem with it is we have a decimal divisor, or a decimal denominator, which we don't want. We want that to be a whole number. So your job is going to be to figure out what you can multiply that by 10, by 100, by 1,000, so that it becomes a whole number. Now remember, whatever you multiply the denominator by, you're going to multiply the numerator by. And then I want you to see if you can get your equivalent fraction with all whole numbers. So pause the video, see if you can figure out what to do, restart it when you're done. Go. All right, so let's see what you did. First off, let me go back to here. I know if I multiply 0.75 times 100, that's going to move that decimal point 2 times to the right, and it's going to make it 75. And that's the whole number I want. Now, whatever I do to the denominator, I do to the numerator. So I have to multiply that by 100. And if I do that, that's going to move that decimal point twice to the right. And I'm going to get 5,250. So keep in mind, this fraction is equivalent to this fraction. But we like this one better because it's all whole numbers, right? So that's the division problem we're going to solve. So remember, pause if I'm going too fast for you. So now, your job is to do 5,250 divided by 75, because that will get us the answer to the original problem. All right? So you should already have a counting by 75 list from the problem on the previous page. So pause the video, do this division problem, restart it when you're done. Go. Okay. So I'm about to solve it. You should have your division problem done, and I have my counting by list ready to go. First, 75 does not go into 5 or 50, but it does go into 525 exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, which is 525. Subtract 0. Now, a little shortcut. Rather than bringing down the 0 and figuring out 75 goes into 0 times, anytime instead of bringing down a 0 at the end, I just bring it up right into my answer. And that's my answer to my question. How many paper flowers did she sell? So it was 70 flowers. Now, does that make sense? Remember my estimate was about 50? Yeah, it's pretty close. Now, you know how that estimate would have helped you? Is let's say for a second, oops, let me undo that. Let's say for a second, you never brought that 0 up, and you just thought the answer was 7. Well, then I would hope you would say, ooh, 7 isn't really close to 50, so I must have done something wrong. And maybe you would have that. Oops, I have that on fat pen. Sorry about that. And then maybe you would have added your 0 then to get 70. All right? So, anyway, if you had that one right, good. If not, pause the video and make your corrections. Because now, you're about to try one completely on your own. So you're about to do number 16. All right, so for number 16, your job is to read it. You need to figure out what your division problem is. And remember, you need to change it so you are not dividing by a decimal number. You need to divide by a whole number. All right, so however you do that is up to you. But when you're done with your division problem, hit play and see how you did. All right, try 16 on your own now. Go. Okay, so let's check it out. So in this problem, it says, every day Marco puts 25 cents into a jar for savings. One day he counted his money and found he had $91.75. How many days had he been saving? So think about this for a second. His total is $91.75. And the reason why you are dividing by 25 cents is because each 25 cents was a day. So, because it says every day he put 25 cents into a jar. So you're just trying to figure out how many 25 cents there are in 91.75. So that's a division problem. Now, let's see if you changed it so you had no decimal, because you don't want to divide by a decimal. So what you're going to do next is, if you multiply the denominator and the numerator by 100, you're going to have 9,175 over 25. So, are you still in it? If you are, keep watching. If not, pause and start fixing your mistake. So now, you're going to do your division problem. 9,175 divided by 25. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is get myself a little bit of a counting by 25 list. Okay, so counting by 25 list, there's some of my favorite ones to do because you're just counting quarters. 25 cents, 50 cents, 75, $1. All right, are you ready? So 25 does not go into 9, but it does go into the 91, and it goes in 3 times, which is 75. So when I subtract, I get 16. Bring down the 7. See if you're still in it. If not, pause. Start making your correction now. I'm going to continue. 25 into 167 goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And 6 times 25 is 150. Every time I subtract, I must bring something down. All right, did you make it this far? Because you're almost done if you did. Last, I must figure out 25 into 175, and that goes 7 times, which is 175. Subtract 0, and there's no remainder. So when it asks how many days has he been saving, he's been saving for 367 days. All right, if you didn't have that answer, you want to pause the video or rewind it a little bit to figure out where you messed up in the long division. If you did have it, hey, guess what? You're done. And as always, thanks for watching.